So yeah, I saw John Wick 3 and I really, really didn't like it. This is one of the more miserable theater experiences I've had in a long time. And that's not to say that this isn't a movie without shining aspects to it. This isn't a terrible movie by any means. It still has that great action that you expect out of these movies. It's well choreographed. It's shot in nice wide shots so you can see everything that's happening. But this movie, unlike the first one and unlike the second one to some degree, has nothing else. Nothing else.
You have no idea what's coming.
Mr. Wick broke the rules.
This is one movie that if you've liked the John Wick series up until this point, then you will probably like this movie because it doesn't do anything that the other two don't. It keeps it pretty safe, and for that, I think a lot of people will like it. It has great action. Again, it has great set pieces. There's some interesting places where he fights. He fights in a stable. That's a fun scene. He fights in a room of knives, and that's a fun scene. I think people will get what they want out of this movie. It's just that if you are looking for literally anything else, this is not the movie you should be watching. You should be watching The Raid. You should be watching Mission Impossible Fallout. You should be watching basically any other action movie. You could even watch the first John Wick again, because this movie is so light on every other aspect needed to make a movie. And that is my biggest problem with it, and why it was such a miserable experience for me. Because story, where is it? Oh right, it doesn't exist. There is no story in this movie, and there is no progression. There's no 3-act structure. There's no structure of any kind. For the first hour of this movie, there are no stakes. There is nothing that our hero is trying to accomplish. There's no objective. And it's just mindless action accompanied with a lady walking around and slapping everyone's wrist that helped John Wick in the last movie or even in this movie. And that is quite literally the first hour. John Wick runs away from guys. John Wick fights guys. Cut to lady slapping person's wrist. Cut back to John Wick doing the same thing again. There is no story, and it was mind-boggling.
Nice suit.
Good to see you too. I need your help.
After this, we are less than even.
Throughout the movie, I kept thinking about movies like I've already named, Fallout and The Raid, because they do action very well, and then they also have enough to where you can understand what our characters want, what our characters are trying to achieve, and to some extent who these characters are. Fallout is a movie about Tom Cruise doing crazy stunts and trying to stop a nuclear holocaust. Simple. The Raid is about a band of police officers that get stuck in a mafia building and are trying to get out. Simple. John Wick 3, John Wick is on the run. And John Wick is on the run. That's it. That is literally the whole movie until one point when he wanders out in the desert and finds somebody that's above the high table, which is supposedly the elite of the elite in the underground hitman world. And then the guy says, just cut off a finger and then go kill this guy that you like and you'll be fine. And then you say, oh, an inciting incident, things will happen. And then 10 minutes later, he just says, no, I'm not going to do that. So you say, okay, now what? Now where will the story go? He'll just fight more guys endlessly, and then it ends. That's the whole movie. I just described the whole movie. You don't need to see it.
Let us begin.
Despite this movie having no structure, no story, hardly any progression, the biggest thing that bothered me about it was the fact that John Wick is untouchable in this movie. The only time that John Wick sustains a major injury is in, quite literally, the first scene of the movie. There isn't a single moment where John Wick gets hurt again. He gets minor bumps and bruises and scrapes, and that's it. There are so many action scenes in this movie where it is obvious the choreographers are working around John Wick not getting hurt. There are so many sequences in this movie where it's painful to watch because it's so obvious that they had to have things get in the way of people hurting John Wick because he's out in the open. He's running around open streets, so you can't just have 15 guys come on him because he will die. So you have 15 guys come near him, and then he hits one guy and the guy falls over and can't get up for 15 minutes until he gets next to him again. And it gets so grating towards the end of this movie because most of the action in this just boils down to gunfight after gunfight with minor martial arts mixed in, and that's the extent of the action. Going back to a movie I already mentioned, Mission Impossible Fallout, in that movie you have a variety of different action scenes. You have the halo jump that they legitimately did. You have this car chase scene. You have a foot chase scene. You have hand-to-hand combat. You have a helicopter fight sequence, and so much more. And that is what differentiates movies like that with movies like this, where you can tell that it's being done well, but there is so little variety here that it gets numbing to a point. When you watch 5,000 guys get shot in the face, watching another 5,000 guys get shot in the face gets boring, and you need to switch it up.
What do you need? Guns. Lots of guns.
And that might not be a problem with a movie that had a story, perhaps, but this doesn't. And that might not be a problem for a movie that has characters that you like, but this doesn't. And not only does it not have characters that you like, but they're characters that don't get hurt. If people are making fun of Star Wars for having stormtroopers that miss constantly, this movie needs to be made fun of because nobody can hit any of the characters that are important to the story. No one. No one gets killed in this movie that has any relevance to the story. Even people you think get killed don't get killed. And even when John Wick falls off a 50-story some odd high building and hits every single thing on the way down, he's fine. He flips off the camera at the end, and that's funny because he's fine. He fell off a building and he's fine. There's just, at a certain point, this franchise became the world. And I think that would be fine if the action was differentiated enough. The filmmakers saw what people liked about John Wick 1, the action and the simplistic world building, and they said, let's double down on both of those things and do literally nothing else. And that is okay for one movie. A simple story, a guy gets his dog killed and he goes kills those guys. And then, oh, there's a hotel for hitmen? Interesting. Oh, there's little coins specifically for hitman? Interesting. But then the filmmakers double down on this world and then get lost in the minutia of it. When you have the same action scene on loop for 2 hours and boring world building that's in your face and slows the pacing of the movie down, intercut with absolutely no story or characters that are interesting, you get a 4 out of 10, which this movie is, a 4 out of 10. The action is fun. It's okay, I guess, in the most simplistic way possible. It's well choreographed. It's well shot for the most part. But the rest of the movie is just not that great. Just straight out, it's just not fun to watch a guy that's invincible fight a whole bunch of people endlessly. It's not my idea of a good time. I'll just watch Mission Impossible Fallout, where a guy that's invincible does death-defying things and then they're self-aware that he is invincible. Let me just watch that.